Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift into one of the strangest little crossroads where faith, history, and the early internet all meet, and I promise, it's way more relaxing than it sounds. Imagine you're lying back right now, eyes half closed, while I take you on this quiet walk through dimly lit streets in northern Italy. Somewhere out there, a teenage boy is hunched over a silver laptop, typing lines of code with soft clicks, chasing something most adults around him don't even notice. He thinks, and stay with me here, that the internet might actually be a road to heaven. Sounds wild, right? I know what you're thinking. If the internet is a road anywhere, it's more like a 6-lane highway straight into chaos, cat videos, and an endless supply of pizza reviews. But to Carlo Acutis, this skinny kid growing up in Milan in the early 2000s, it was something else entirely. He thought maybe, just maybe, every click could become a prayer, and every page could become a doorway. You probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes in his world without checking your notifications, but Carlo? He saw through the noise. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from tonight, maybe your city, maybe your time zone. It's always fun to see where everyone's falling asleep from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking slowly through the cobblestone streets of Milan, somewhere in the late 1990s. No smartphones. No TikTok. No instant Google Translate to save you when you get lost. The air smells faintly of roasted coffee, and the tram bells ring faintly in the distance. It's a city where fashion rules the day and espresso rules the night. Up ahead, there's a boy about 10 years old, carrying a backpack that's way too heavy for his small frame, yet his eyes, they're glowing, sharp, restless. That's Carlo. You follow him quietly, though he doesn't notice you. He's deep in thought, the kind of thoughts no 10-year-old should really be having. Big questions about meaning, purpose, and strangely enough, computers. Carlo's family apartment is small and modest, but inside his room, there's one object that instantly catches your eye. An old silver Acer laptop, thicker than a hardcover book, humming faintly as it boots up. The screen flickers, and when Carlo lifts the lid, the tiny cooling fan roars like a miniature hurricane. This isn't just a laptop. It's a portal. Carlo's fingers hover above the keyboard, hesitating for just a moment, and then, he clicks. Connect. The dial-up tones begin, high-pitched and jarring, beep beep, rear-ee. If you grew up back then, you probably remember yelling, "Don't pick up the phone! I'm online!" But Carlo doesn't flinch. He sits there, wide-eyed, watching as the first plaintext pages slowly load, line by line. It's 1999, and the internet is still raw, unpolished. No Facebook, no YouTube, no Netflix. Google barely exists. And yet Carlo sees something most adults don't, a limitless network of connections, ideas, and possibilities. While others see entertainment, Carlo sees potential. You sit beside him quietly, watching as he scrolls through obscure religious archives. He stumbles upon something strange, a small note about Eucharistic miracles. A spark ignites. He whispers softly, almost to himself, "Why isn't anyone collecting these?" And that's when you watch history pivot, right there in his tiny room. Carlo opens a blank file, types his first line of HTML, and starts building something no one asked for but everyone would someday need. The soft clacking of keys fills the room. No lo-fi playlist, no noise cancellation, just pure focus. On the desk, there's a warm cup of cocoa, a slightly bent Bible, and a silver crucifix gleaming under the desk lamp. Each keystroke lays another brick on the digital road he imagines, HTML, body, and beyond. You look at him, half amused. While you're still trying to remember your Wi-Fi password, this 10-year-old is laying the groundwork for something that will outlive him. Outside, the Milan night hums faintly, a motorbike rumbles past, a stray dog barks in the distance, and the breeze carries the metallic scent of rain. Carlo barely notices. He's busy translating Latin and Italian texts into English, painstakingly, word by word, so that anyone, anywhere, can understand what he's discovered. And then, without looking at you, he murmurs, "If something beautiful, something sacred, exists, why not use the internet to show it to the world?" The simplicity of it sends a shiver down your spine. You think about today, the endless scrolling, the screaming headlines, the memes, the noise. How strange, isn't it? In 1999, a boy barely old enough to ride the tram alone was already seeing the internet not as a playground, but as a pilgrimage. Carlo walks to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to let the cool night breeze slip in. The bells of San Francesco Church ring softly in the distance. His voice is quiet, steady, and certain. If people knew how much they were loved, they'd never turn away. And you get it now. Years later they'll call him Heaven's influencer. Not because he has followers, but because he has a vision. A different kind of connection. From the living room, his mother calls him to bed. Carlo saves his file, his very first HTML page, and names it Miracoli Eucharisticide.html. You watch him close the laptop gently, unaware that this tiny, simple act is the first step on a path that will change more lives than anyone can count, including yours. You lean back, listening to the faint hum of the ceiling fan, the muffled radio outside the hallway, and you feel your eyelids grow heavier. But deep down, you know this is only the beginning. Carlo is just 10 years old. And everything that matters hasn't even happened yet. You're still in Milan, but the night has shifted. The air feels cooler now, heavier, as though the city itself is holding its breath. Somewhere in the distance, a tram squeals to a stop, and you hear the faint buzz of street lamps overhead. You follow Carlo out of his apartment the next morning, his small figure darting down narrow cobblestone streets, backpack swinging against his shoulders. There's something different about him today, you can feel it. Carlo isn't just wondering, he's searching. You trail behind him quietly, footsteps echoing softly, and every so often he glances up at the tall church spires that slice into the cloudy Milanese sky. You realize you're walking alongside a 10-year-old who already thinks like a historian. The street opens up to Santa Maria del Grazie, one of Milan's oldest churches. The facade is weathered, its stones stained with centuries of rain and incense smoke. Carlo steps inside, and instantly, the chaos of the city melts into silence. The air smells faintly of beeswax and candle soot, mixed with something older, the kind of scent you only find in places where time slows down. Your shoes tap against the cold marble as you follow him down the central aisle. Sunlight spills through narrow stained glass windows, splashing fragments of crimson and gold across the floor. Carlo doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. You can feel the weight of the centuries pressing in from all sides. Somewhere nearby, a priest is murmuring a prayer in Italian, his voice soft and rhythmic, like a lullaby. A woman kneels in the far corner, her hands clasped tight, whispering something only she and God can hear. And then Carlo stops, right in front of a small side altar you almost didn't notice. His fingers hover above a bronze plaque. You lean in to read the inscription, though the Italian feels ancient and tangled. It speaks of a miracle that happened here nearly 500 years ago. Carlo's voice is barely a whisper. This is where the bread bled. You blink, thinking you must have misheard. But no, that's what it says. The story goes like this. During a quiet mass in the 15th century, a priest began to doubt the presence of Christ in the Eucharist. As he broke the consecrated bread, it started to bleed, tiny crimson drops staining the white linen beneath it. The relic is still here, locked inside a small glass case beside the altar. You lean closer, half expecting the centuries-old bloodstains to have faded away, but no, faint, brownish traces remain, stubbornly clinging to history. And suddenly you understand why Carlo is fascinated. Because here's the thing no one talks about. There are dozens, maybe hundreds, of these reported miracles scattered across Europe. Most people never notice them, buried as they are inside dusty archives and whispered family stories. But Carlo? He wants to find every single one. You follow him through a narrow doorway that leads into a small sacristy lined with wooden cabinets. Carlo carefully opens one of the drawers, and inside are brittle documents tied with faded red ribbons. He runs his fingers gently across the fragile parchment, as though touching the pulse of history itself. They're all connected, he whispers, his eyes scanning page after page. If people saw all of this, maybe they'd believe again. You glance over his shoulder and see hand-drawn sketches, Latin annotations, and wax seals half crumbling with age. The words are difficult to decipher, but the stories are clear enough: bread turning into flesh, wine turning into blood, witnesses falling to their knees in shock. Some historians, you recall, still argue about whether these miracles were real or symbolic, faith meeting imagination in the middle. But Carlo doesn't care about debates. He cares about documenting, preserving, showing. Outside, the bells of Milan begin to toll noon, deep and resonant. Carlo closes the drawer carefully and steps back into the sunlight. You trail after him as he walks along the narrow streets lined with gelaterias and vintage bookshops. Tourists bustle by, chattering in half a dozen languages, but Carlo moves as though he's invisible, his thoughts miles away. You ask him, or maybe just think it out loud, why this matters so much to him. He stops, tilts his head, and smiles faintly. Because faith isn't just a feeling, he says softly. It's a story. And stories need to be told. That lands heavier than you expect. You think about all the forgotten stories buried in history, the ones lost in libraries no one visits anymore, and suddenly, Carlo's mission doesn't seem small at all. Later that afternoon, you and Carlo find yourselves in a tiny backstreet cafe. The kind with only 3 tables, old lace curtains, and the comforting hiss of an espresso machine. The owner, a stooped old man with silver hair, recognizes Carlo instantly, and brings him a steaming cup of hot chocolate without asking. Carlo spreads out a few photocopies across the table, grainy images of ancient monstrances, old testimonies, faded signatures from bishops long gone. Each one tells a story, and you can almost hear the whispers trapped in those yellowed pages. And here's the fascinating part. One of these documents describes a miracle that supposedly took place just outside Milan, a tiny chapel barely anyone visits. The problem is, the location on the map doesn't match any modern records. Carlo leans closer, lowering his voice. We have to see it. If it's still there, no one else even knows. And you realize this isn't just research anymore. This is a treasure hunt. By evening, You're walking with Carlo along the outer edge of the city. The streets are quieter here, the air cooler, carrying the earthy scent of wet stone after a recent drizzle. Shadows stretch long across the pavement as the sun dips low behind the rooftops. You finally find the chapel, if you can even call it that. It's small, half swallowed by ivy, the wooden door warped with age. Carlo pushes it open, and the hinges groan like they haven't moved in years. Inside, the air is damp and cold, carrying the faint, metallic smell of old coins and candle wax. There's almost nothing left, just a cracked altar and a single glass case on the far wall. Inside it lies a fragment of cloth, brownish red at the edges. Carlo stands perfectly still, breathing softly. You can feel it too, the weight of silence, the weight of memory. As you leave, the wind picks up, rustling the ivy leaves behind you. Carlo doesn't say a word, but you can see the spark in his eyes has grown brighter. The discoveries are piling up. One website, one story, one miracle at a time, his archive is starting to take shape. And yet, as the two of you walk back toward the city lights, you can't shake the feeling that Carlo knows something you don't. Something bigger. Something waiting on the horizon. Because tonight was just a taste. Night falls over Milan, soft and weightless, like a blanket settling over the city. The streets below Carlo's apartment are quieter now, though every so often a Vespa hums by, leaving behind the faint smell of gasoline and rain-soaked stone. You climb the narrow staircase behind him, following the faint creak of wooden steps until you reach his small bedroom, his sanctuary, his command center, and though he doesn't know it yet, the birthplace of something extraordinary. The silver Acer laptop sits at the edge of his desk, lid slightly open, screen glowing faintly in the dim light. There's a single lamp on, casting long shadows across a messy pile of papers, photocopies of ancient manuscripts, handwritten notes in Italian, and a stack of floppy disks labeled carefully in Carlo's neat handwriting. The quiet hum of the ceiling fan above makes you instinctively lower your voice, as though stepping into a library. Carlo pulls up his chair, adjusts it just so, and opens the laptop fully. The fan inside roars louder this time, its tiny motor struggling to keep up. You hear the high-pitched beep-beep, re-eyeing of the dial-up connection again, a sound so distinctly late 90s that you can almost smell the plastic casing of old modems and tangled phone cords. And then, connection established. The homepage he's been working on pops up, a rough sketch of what will one day become miracoliucrstici.org. Right now, though, it's primitive. White background, blue hyperlinks, clunky HTML tables. No modern design flourishes, no animations, no social media buttons. Just Carlo's raw dedication translated into code. You sit beside him as he leans forward, eyes narrowing with focus. His fingers move across the keyboard, tapping softly in steady rhythm, like a pianist playing a nocturne, each keystroke deliberate and precise. On the left side of the screen, there's a menu listing countries: Italy, France, Spain, Poland, India. Beneath each country name, he's compiling miracles, organizing them by date, location, and documented eyewitness accounts. You hover your finger above the trackpad, tempted to click, but Carlo's gaze sharpens as if he can sense you thinking about it. "Wait," he says softly, without looking up. "Every detail has to be right." You glance down at the photocopies spread across the desk, pages yellowed with age, written in Latin, Greek, and sometimes fractured Italian. Carlo's translated entire sections himself, cross-checking obscure church documents against footnotes from forgotten theological journals. At 10 years old. Meanwhile, you spent last night Googling how to boil an egg. Carlo notices your expression and smiles faintly without pausing his typing. God gave us these miracles, he whispers, but the internet lets us keep them alive. That's when it hits you. This isn't just about faith for him. It's about preservation. He's building a digital reliquary, a cathedral made not of stone and stained glass, but of HTML and JPGs. Suddenly, the apartment goes dark for a moment, a summer thunderstorm rolling in. The rain outside splashes against the windowpane, tapping softly, like fingertips drumming against glass. Carlo doesn't flinch. He's too deep inside the code, inside the story he's weaving. Lightning flashes, briefly illuminating the crucifix hanging above his desk. For a split second, the silver catches the light, and the room feels almost otherworldly. You shiver, partly from the sudden chill, partly from the weight of what's unfolding before you. Then, just as suddenly, everything steadies. The fan hums again. The laptop light glows steady. And Carlo keeps typing. At some point, he pushes his chair back, stretching his arms with a quiet sigh. He swivels to look at you for the first time tonight, and there's a spark in his eyes you've never seen before. Do you realize, he says softly, this website could reach more people than any priest ever could? You nod slowly. Because you do realize it now. A new file opens on the screen, one dedicated entirely to Lanciano, an ancient city in Italy where one of the most famous Eucharistic miracles is said to have occurred in the 8th century. Carlo starts compiling photographs, high-resolution scans of relics, diagrams of old churches, side-by-side translations of eyewitness testimonies. He pauses at one particularly faded document and points to a line of Latin. Hoc est enim corpus meum, he murmurs, translating softly. This is my body. For a moment, there's only silence, except for the steady tapping of rain outside and the occasional soft whir of the laptop's fan. You feel the history seeping into the room, as though the past itself has pulled up a chair beside you. Hours pass like minutes. By the time Carlo finally leans back, it's close to midnight. The website's skeleton is complete, a rough frame holding centuries of faith and mystery within a single, fragile page. He saves the file, naming it carefully, miracle_index.html. Then he sits still, staring at the blinking cursor, lost in thought. The internet can be dangerous, he says quietly, almost to himself. But if we fill it with light, maybe it becomes something else. You don't answer. You just sit there, letting the weight of that idea sink in. As the night deepens, you realize something curious. This project isn't just changing the internet. It's changing Carlo. You can see it in the way he carries himself now, shoulders straighter, gaze steadier, like someone who's finally found their purpose. From the hallway, you hear his mother's soft voice calling him to bed again. This time, he closes the laptop gently, placing his hand on the crucifix for a brief moment before switching off the desk lamp. The room falls into darkness, except for the faint glow of Milan beyond the window, the street lamps, the moving headlights, the quiet city slowly drifting into sleep. And yet you sense that Carlo's journey is only accelerating. The archive is alive now, breathing through every line of code. Soon, he'll uncover stories that even historians have forgotten, and his little silver laptop will become a beacon for people across the world. But for tonight, you let the hum of the ceiling fan and the soft patter of rain lull you into the stillness of the moment. The world outside is still asleep when you wake to the faint whir of Carlo's silver laptop. It's early morning now, but the dim Milanese sunlight hasn't yet reached his small bedroom. The glow from the screen paints faint halos across the walls, illuminating stacks of floppy disks and neatly labeled envelopes. Carlo's already back at work, hunched over his desk like a quiet architect, building something nobody else can see yet. You slide into the chair beside him, rubbing the last bits of sleep from your eyes, and as you do, the sound returns, that shrill, nostalgic song of the dial-up modem. Beep, beep, KRK, KRK. If you grew up in the 2000s, you know it. The sound that meant magic was on the way, or frustration, depending on whether someone picked up the landline downstairs. Carlo grins faintly as the connection stabilizes. Listen to that, he whispers. That's the sound of the future waking up. You're not sure anyone else on Earth would describe dial-up like that, but that's Carlo for you. He sees meaning where most people see noise. The early internet is wild. You remember it too, right? The clunky homepages, the blinking GIFs, the endless pop-ups promising, "Congratulations! You're the millionth visitor!" No one really knows what to do with it yet. Corporations are trying to sell books online, teenagers are making chaotic fan pages, and somewhere out there, someone's typing, LOL, for the very first time. Carlo, though, isn't interested in the chaos. He's interested in the potential. To him, the internet isn't just a tool, it's a bridge. You watch as he navigates through primitive forums, religious archives, and even early Vatican bulletins stored on servers that creak like old library floors. He takes meticulous notes, scribbling dates and page numbers in the margins of his notebook. And somewhere between all this chaos, you see something beautiful happening. Carlo is learning the language of the internet, not just HTML, but connection itself. At one point, he turns to you, leaning back in his chair, stretching his arms behind his head. "People use this thing for anything," he says softly. "Shopping, games, gossip. But what if it's supposed to be more?" You raise an eyebrow. More? The internet, as far as you can see, is still a clunky, slow dial-up disaster. But Carlo's eyes shine in the pale blue glow of the screen, and you realize he's dead serious. "It can bring people closer to God," he continues, tapping his finger against the screen. "Closer to each other. Imagine, if the whole world could see miracles, maybe they'd believe again." You feel a little shiver run down your spine. Not because of the idea itself, though it's powerful, but because you realize Carlo's right. And maybe the rest of the world isn't ready for him yet. He clicks through another forum, this one hidden deep inside a forgotten corner of the web. The background is black, the font green, and the user interface looks like it hasn't been updated since before you were born. He scrolls past usernames like holy_heart98 and ancient_truths, each thread filled with stories about unexplained phenomena, visions, and sacred relics scattered across the globe. Some posts sound like fairy tales, others like careful testimonies from priests and historians. Carlo bookmarks each one without judgment. His philosophy is simple: collect first, verify later. You can't help but laugh quietly as you watch him. 10 years old, leaning over his laptop, elbows buried in papers, using a slow, clunky internet connection to archive miracles that span centuries. You mutter something about how you'd barely learned to double-click at his age. He smirks without looking up. "Well," he says softly, "double-clicking opens windows, but faith opens doors." You groan at the pun, but secretly you love it. By midday, the rain has stopped, and sunlight spills faintly through the window, landing right on the small silver crucifix above Carlo's desk. You watch as he gently places a stack of floppy disks beside the laptop, backups of his work. He labels each one carefully. Milan Relic 1.html, France _Miracle 2.jpg, Index V1.3. This is where his methodical side shows. For Carlo, the internet isn't infinite chaos. It's an endless cathedral waiting to be organized. Each line of code, each scanned document, each archived photo, they're all stones in the walls he's building. Then, something unexpected happens. He stumbles onto an obscure Vatican bulletin from the mid-1990s, hidden deep inside a barely functioning server. The language is dense, full of formalities, but there's one line that makes Carlo pause. These testimonies, scattered and incomplete, deserve to be preserved for future generations. He leans back in his chair, eyes locked on the sentence. That's it, he whispers. That's what I'm doing. I'm building the preservation they couldn't. And just like that, you realize Carlo isn't following anyone's instructions anymore. He's creating his own blueprint, for faith, for history, for digital memory itself. But here's the strange thing about the early internet, it's fragile. One wrong click, one broken server, and entire pages vanish without warning. You've seen it happen already tonight, links dead, images missing, archives erased. Carlo notices it too. That's why this matters, he says firmly. If we don't save it now, we lose it forever. The way he says it makes your chest tighten a little. You glance at his laptop, this tiny silver machine humming like it's holding up the weight of the entire world. Maybe in a way it is. Night creeps in again. Outside, the street lamps flicker on, and the tram rattles past. Carlo's still working, eyes red from staring at the screen, but his pace never slows. At some point, he reaches for a floppy disk, labels it miracles_master_v2.html, and carefully tucks it into a small wooden box under his desk. It's almost ritualistic, like placing relics into a reliquary. The internet hums around him, alive but chaotic, messy but full of promise. And Carlo, at 10 years old, sits at its edge like a quiet architect, sketching the first fragile foundations of something bigger than himself. You lean back, letting the low buzz of the modem and the soft patter of late-night drizzle lull you into a kind of half-sleep. Somewhere in the background, the city of Milan exhales softly, street by street, as though settling into its own dream. But Carlo isn't dreaming. He's building. And soon the world will notice. Morning drifts softly into Milan, slipping through thin curtains and spilling pale gold across Carlo's small bedroom. The silver Acer laptop is closed for once, resting quietly on his desk, but Carlo himself is already awake. You follow him as he tiptoes out into the hallway, his sneakers silent against the cool tiles, and down the narrow stairwell into the street. Today, he's not chasing code. Today, he's chasing something else entirely. The sky is overcast, but the city hums to life around you, vendors setting up stalls, the faint clatter of cups in distant cafes, the low hum of a tram pulling away from its stop. You trail behind Carlo as he makes his way towards San Francesco Church, its stone facade rising from the ground like something carved out of time itself. The bells ring softly in the distance, as if welcoming him home. Inside the church, everything slows down. The air is cooler here, carrying the faint scent of incense and polished wood. The chatter of Milan outside fades until it's replaced by something quieter, the steady flicker of candles along the walls, the echo of footsteps on marble, and a faint choir practicing somewhere deeper within the building. Carlo steps past the rows of pews and kneels at the small side altar, his head bowed low, hands folded loosely in prayer. You sit beside him, the worn wood of the pew creaking slightly beneath you, and for a moment you almost forget you're in the 2000s. A small crucifix hangs above the altar, its silver tarnished with age, and beside it, a handwritten note in Italian reads, "Lord, guide me through my doubts." You glance sideways at Carlo, wondering if he ever has any. And here's the thing nobody really tells you about Carlo. His faith wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy or performative. He wasn't the kid standing on street corners shouting sermons or handing out pamphlets. Instead, his faith lived in the quiet spaces, the pauses between thoughts, the careful questions whispered under his breath when no one else was listening. One evening, as the two of you sit under the stained glass windows, he speaks softly without looking up. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing this right," he admits. "Like, if the internet is really the way to bring people closer to God, or if I'm just wasting time." You pause, unsure how to answer, and Carlo lets out a quiet laugh, not mocking, but almost shy. "Then I think about those miracles," he adds gently, "and I can't help but believe they deserve to be seen." You notice how he draws strength from small things others overlook. The way sunlight filters through the stained glass, casting fractured patterns of ruby and gold across the cold marble floor. The faint hum of beeswax candles melting slowly, one drop at a time. Even the muffled sound of the choir's rehearsal feels like it feeds him somehow, giving him just enough energy to keep building, to keep documenting, to keep believing. And maybe that's why San Francesco feels so important to him. This church isn't grand like Milan's Duomo or as famous as Santa Maria del Grazie, but it's here, tucked into a quiet corner of the city, waiting for those who seek it. After a while, Carlo rises, dusting his knees off lightly. He leads you toward the back of the church, down a hallway lined with heavy oak doors. One of them creaks open into a small sacristy, and the faint scent of ancient parchment hits you instantly. Inside, cabinets overflow with old handwritten ledgers, faded altar cloths, and stacks of yellowing photographs. Carlo moves carefully, reverently, as though every object carries a secret. And maybe they do. "Look," he whispers, pulling out an old folder tied with a red ribbon. Inside are grainy black and white photographs of monstrances and reliquaries, carefully labeled with dates and locations. One, in particular, catches his eye, a 17th century reliquary containing fragments from a documented Eucharistic miracle. He studies it silently for a long moment, his finger tracing the edges of the photograph. "This belongs online," he murmurs finally. "People should be able to see this." There's a subtle shift in him here, you can feel it. Before, Carlo was just collecting information, storing it like a digital librarian. But now, it's becoming something deeper, a mission. And yet you sense a quiet weight behind his determination. He never says it outright, but you can feel his awareness of the internet's dangers, too. The noise, the anger, the endless distractions that pull people away from meaning rather than toward it. He mentions it softly one afternoon, sitting on the church steps while pigeons peck lazily at crumbs nearby. "The internet can pull you down," he says, gesturing vaguely toward the street. "But maybe it can also lift you up. It's like a road. But you choose the direction." It's a simple idea, but it lingers in your mind longer than you expect. One evening you return to Carlo's room after sunset. His laptop hums softly in the corner, the glow from the screen spilling across the walls, but he's not typing. Instead, He's sitting cross-legged on the floor, Bible open in his lap, murmuring a short prayer. He looks up when you step inside, his expression calm and steady. "I pray the internet doesn't become just noise," he says quietly. "I pray it becomes a map. A map." The word settles into you like a seed taking root. Because that's exactly what Carlo's building, isn't it? Not just a collection of facts, not just a website. He's mapping meaning, weaving together miracles, faith, and technology into something that feels strangely timeless. And yet, the more you sit with him, the more you realize something else. This isn't just about faith for Carlo. It's also about connection. He doesn't want to hoard these stories like museum artifacts. He wants to open doors, create bridges, let people step into something bigger than themselves. His belief isn't naive, it's hopeful. And in a way, that hope feels contagious. As the night deepens, you hear the distant bells of San Francesco toll softly in the humid Milanese air. Carlo closes his Bible, sets it gently on his desk, and opens his laptop again. The screen lights up, blue and bright, and he dives back into his code, the silent architect, building the foundation of his road to heaven, one page at a time. You lean back, letting the sound of his keyboard lull you, steady and soft, like rain tapping lightly against a windowpane. And somehow, you know this is only the beginning. The rain has stopped by the time you wake up, but the Milan air still carries that soft, damp chill, like stone that's been holding moisture for centuries. Carlo's already at his desk. Of course he is. And the silver Acer laptop hums gently, its tiny fan buzzing against the quiet of early morning. On the screen, a simple homepage begins to take shape, a pale background, basic navigation links, clunky HTML tables, nothing fancy, nothing polished. But as you sit down beside him, you realize this isn't just a web page. It's becoming a living, breathing archive. A monument in pixels. Carlo leans forward, his shoulders slightly hunched, fingers tapping steadily. You notice the menu bar at the top of the page. Miracoli Eucharistici nel mondo. Eucharistic miracles around the world. Beneath it, he's begun sorting the content into sections by country. Italy, France, Spain, Poland, India, Mexico, Argentina. Each hyperlink will eventually open an entire gallery of photographs, diagrams, testimonies, and, in Carlo's words, traces of heaven hiding in plain sight. You glance over his shoulder, watching him edit a block of HTML, inserting small images, aligning text, balancing everything with painstaking precision. He pauses occasionally to double-check his handwritten notes, flipping through worn photocopies stacked neatly on the desk. Some pages are marked with colorful sticky tabs, others littered with scribbled Italian translations in his neat handwriting. Accuracy matters, he murmurs softly, without looking up. If we're telling these stories, we owe them the truth. It strikes you how deliberate he is, how careful. He isn't just uploading old stories. He's curating them, verifying them, framing them in a way that anyone, anywhere, could understand. You can't help but smile faintly as you think about the internet today. Flashy videos, endless scrolling, memes, and chaos. And here's Carlo, quietly building something that feels like it belongs in a library instead of a timeline. Then, something catches your eye. A folder on his desk labeled, Restricted Archives. You raise an eyebrow, but Carlo notices and smirks before you even ask. The Vatican, he whispers, leaning closer as though sharing a secret. Some of these documents aren't easy to find. He explains that he's spent hours digging through obscure diocesan websites, scanning ancient bulletins, and even emailing parish offices halfway across Europe. Some priests never responded, some sent scans too blurry to read, and one actually mailed him a photocopy of a 17th century manuscript tied with twine. Carlo holds it up carefully now, the paper brown and brittle, as though a sneeze might turn it to dust. "This is why we can't leave it in drawers anymore," he says softly. "If we don't save it now, it disappears." He scrolls through one of the pages on his site, a section dedicated entirely to Lanciano, the famous 8th century miracle where bread reportedly turned into human flesh. His gallery includes close-up photographs, scientific analyses, eyewitness testimonies, and even diagrams showing the exact location of the relics. You pause at one particular scan, a report from 1971 in which Italian scientists analyzed the relics using modern methods. It's written in dense, technical language, but the conclusion is chilling. The flesh is real. The blood is real. The tissue belongs to a human heart. Carlo doesn't say anything. He doesn't have to. The weight of the document hangs in the silence between you. A sudden burst of static cuts through the quiet, his dial-up connection struggling again. The screen freezes for a moment, then slowly refreshes, revealing another half-complete gallery, Argentina, 1996. This one is recent, barely a few years old. Carlo's voice lowers, almost reverent. "This one's important," he says. "There's actual video evidence, but it's hidden deep in parish archives." You lean closer as he clicks open a grainy clip, a short, shaky recording of a tiny white fragment resting in a glass vial. The footage is silent, eerie, as though even sound hesitated to intrude on the moment. He pauses the video halfway, sighing softly. "I'll upload it when I'm sure I have permission," he says. "Some things deserve care." And that's when you notice it. Carlo's entire process is reverent. He treats every photograph, every document, every testimony as though it were a sacred relic itself. But make no mistake, this isn't blind devotion. He double-checks everything, cross-referencing each story against multiple sources, translating reports, and even highlighting conflicting accounts in red ink. "People need to know what's real," he says quietly, scrolling through another forum thread filled with rumors. "But they also need to know where the doubts are. Otherwise, it isn't honest." It's rare, you realize, for someone his age, or any age, to balance faith with curiosity so gracefully. By mid-afternoon, the room smells faintly of cocoa and warm electronics. Carlo hasn't moved in hours, except to swap out floppy disks. His makeshift backups stack neatly on the edge of the desk. The labels are meticulous. Miracles_EU_complete_V1. South America _testimonies_98. Master_index_V2.1. Each disc feels like a miniature reliquary, holding pieces of history no one else has taken the time to preserve. Outside, a soft drizzle begins again, tapping against the glass. You lean back, letting the steady rhythm soothe you, while Carlo keeps working, navigating lines of code like a cartographer charting unmapped terrain. And maybe that's exactly what he is. By evening, the home page is finally ready for its first test. Carlo saves the file, opens the local version, and leans back slightly as the screen renders. It's beautiful in its simplicity. No clutter. No distractions. Just a white canvas, dark text, and a single invitation. Explore the miracles of the Eucharist. See what the world has forgotten. You stare at the screen for a long time, your chest tightening slightly, not because of the design, but because of the weight behind it. This isn't just a website. It's a bridge across centuries. Carlo closes the laptop softly, resting his fingertips on the lid for just a moment, as though saying a silent prayer for what comes next. This is just the start, he whispers, more to himself than to you. There's so much more to find. And you believe him. Because somehow, sitting there in that small Milan bedroom, you know this quiet archive will one day reach further than either of you can imagine. It's late, far past midnight, and Milan has settled into a deep, steady hush. The streets below Carlo's apartment are silent now, except for the occasional echo of distant footsteps fading into darkness. Inside his small bedroom, the only light comes from his silver Acer laptop, glowing softly on the desk like a beacon in the dark. You sit cross-legged on the floor, leaning back against the wall, watching him work. The air smells faintly of rain from the open window, and somewhere outside, a church bell tolls the hour with slow, deliberate chimes. Carlo hasn't spoken in over an hour. He's hunched over his keyboard, scrolling through one web page after another, some about miracles, some about relics, some about faith. But tonight there's something different in his expression. A faint furrow in his brow, like a quiet storm gathering behind his calm gaze. Finally he speaks, voice barely above a whisper. You know, the internet isn't just good things. You blink at him, caught off guard by the weight in his tone. He gestures toward the screen, where a cluttered forum page flickers faintly under the weak dial-up connection. Look at this, he murmurs, scrolling through endless threads filled with rumors, arguments, and outright hostility. Everyone's shouting, but nobody's listening. It's true. The forums are messy, chaotic debates, half-truths, and endless noise. For every testimony about a miracle, there are 5 others mocking it, twisting it, drowning it out. Carlo sighs, leaning back in his chair. It's like walking through a crowd where everyone's holding megaphones. You chuckle softly, but he doesn't. His fingers drum lightly against the desk, restless, thoughtful. I thought, he says slowly, that connecting people would mean understanding each other. But sometimes it just makes us louder, not closer. The rain begins again outside, light and rhythmic, tapping softly against the glass. You notice how Carlo's gaze lingers on the window, as though searching for something beyond it. Then he turns back to you, his voice low but steady. The internet is like a road, he says quietly. It can lead you up, or it can pull you down. The words settle in the room like a small, sudden weight. For a moment, the silence stretches. You hear the faint hum of the laptop fan, the occasional drip from a leaky gutter outside, the far-off murmur of a late-night tram. Carlo leans forward, elbows on his knees, speaking softly as though to himself. I used to think it was neutral, you know? Just information, passing through wires. But it's not. It's choices. He taps a finger gently against the desk. What you click, where you wander, who you listen to, every little choice shapes who you become. You look at him, half in awe, half unsettled. This is a 10-year-old talking, but the weight in his voice feels older somehow, like he's already seen more than he should have. He pulls up one of his half-finished galleries on miracoliusieristici.org and scrolls slowly through the images. Photographs of gilded monstrances, handwritten testimonies, delicate sketches of ancient relics. Then he clicks into another tab, one you hadn't noticed before. A modern website. Bright, flashy, distracting. Dozens of ads blinking across the screen. Headlines screaming for attention. Arguments stacked in endless threads, each one louder than the last. Carlo watches for a moment, his expression unreadable. "This," he says quietly, "is what happens when we forget meaning." You can sense the shift inside him, something sharp, something urgent. He begins speaking faster now, hands gesturing faintly as though sketching the thought midair. "Imagine," he says, "if the internet became a library instead of a market. If people searched for truth, not just noise. If every click carried something sacred, instead of just distractions." There's a spark in his eyes again, the same one you've seen when he's buried deep in archives, piecing together ancient miracles from scraps of forgotten history. But tonight, that spark feels different. Stronger. Clearer. "I think," he whispers, "we get to choose what the internet becomes." Later, as the storm outside grows heavier, you watch him stand by the window, hands resting lightly on the wooden frame. The street below glistens with rain, street lamps reflecting pale circles on the wet pavement. "It's funny," he says softly, his voice barely audible over the rain. "How something invisible, all these wires, all this code, can hold so much power over our lives." He turns back to you then, and for the first time tonight, you see a flicker of something you can't quite name. Not fear, exactly, but caution. "If the internet becomes a road," he says finally, "I want to make sure it points somewhere worth going." You stay up together until almost dawn, the sound of rain blurring softly into the background, your eyelids heavy with exhaustion. Carlo keeps working, refining the site, curating images, translating documents. But between keystrokes, you notice something subtle changing in him. This isn't just about miracles anymore. It's about responsibility. He knows now what most adults haven't figured out yet, that technology doesn't shape us. We shape it. And the stakes are higher than anyone realizes. As you finally drift off to sleep on the small couch in the corner, Carlo's quiet voice is the last thing you hear, a whisper carried between the soft clicks of his keyboard. Heaven or nowhere. That's what's at stake. And you understand deep down that this isn't just a project anymore. It's a calling. It's a warm October afternoon when everything changes. The sun hangs lazily over Milan, filtering pale gold through Carlo's bedroom curtains. His laptop hums softly on the desk, the silver crucifix above it catching a faint glint of light. The air smells faintly of warm cocoa, paper, and rain-soaked stone from the street below. Everything feels ordinary, until Carlo leans back in his chair, blinking slowly, his fingers frozen above the keyboard. At first, you think he's just tired, another late night, another marathon of coding and translating old documents. But then, you see the subtle shift, the way his hand trembles slightly when he reaches for his glass of water, the faint paleness beneath his usually bright cheeks. He exhales quietly, setting the glass down, and murmurs, almost to himself, "I feel dizzy." You insist he lies down, but he shakes his head gently. "Just give me a minute," he says softly, eyes flicking back to the screen. "There's still so much to finish." But the dizziness doesn't pass. Over the next few days, the fatigue worsens. You watch him struggle to climb the stairs, to stay awake during Mass, to carry his backpack without pausing to catch his breath. One evening, when he nearly faints crossing the kitchen, his mother takes him to the hospital. The stark brightness of the hospital corridors replaces the warm, golden tones of his room. The walls are pale, almost sterile, and the faint smell of antiseptic lingers in the air. You follow Carlo into a small examination room, your footsteps soft against the linoleum floor. The doctor speaks quietly, but the words land like stones: acute leukemia. There's a long silence, broken only by the rhythmic beep, beep, beep of a nearby monitor. Carlo sits very still, his small hands folded neatly in his lap, eyes focused on a single spot on the floor. His mother reaches for his hand, holding it tightly. You expect fear, panic, something. But instead, Carlo exhales slowly, and a calmness settles over him like a soft blanket. Okay, he whispers finally. Then I'll offer it up. The first night in the hospital is the hardest. You sit in the corner of his small room, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead, while Carlo lies quietly on the bed, tubes and wires surrounding him like tangled threads. Outside, the city carries on as usual, trams rattling, people laughing on distant sidewalks. But inside, time feels suspended. He reaches for his silver laptop, resting on the bedside table. His mother protests gently, but Carlo shakes his head. I can't stop now, he says softly, adjusting the pillow behind him. The world still needs to see. And so, even here, surrounded by sterile walls and the faint hiss of oxygen, he keeps working on miracoliucrstici.org, updating pages, adding translations, scanning photographs. Sometimes, late at night, you hear him praying softly under his breath. Not pleading, not bargaining, just quiet conversations, like whispers carried upward into the silence. Lord, he murmurs one evening, voice barely audible beneath the hum of machines. If this is my road, then make it count. You feel the words settle deep into your chest, heavier than the steady beeping of the monitor. The days blur together, a cycle of treatments, tests, and waiting. Carlo's face grows paler, his frame thinner, but there's an odd brightness in his eyes, a quiet strength that seems to deepen as his body weakens. One afternoon, a nurse pauses outside his door, holding a small stack of printed photos Carlo requested. She shakes her head lightly and smiles at you. He's not like other kids, she whispers. He asks more about archives than his medicine. Inside, Carlo carefully arranges the new photographs, scans of rare relics from Mexico, India, and Poland, on his bedside table, labeling each one in neat handwriting. One evening, as you sit beside him watching the sunset bleed through the blinds, he turns to you suddenly, eyes brighter than you've ever seen them. Do you know why I love miracles? He asks softly. You shake your head. Because they remind us we're not alone, he says. And if people can see them, maybe they'll find hope where they thought there was none. He smiles faintly, shifting his blanket higher. That's why I called the internet the road to heaven. The words hang in the air between you, fragile but unshakable. But the nights are harder now. Sometimes you hear him stir restlessly, wincing faintly from the bone-deep ache spreading through his small body. Machines beep steadily, nurses move quietly through shadowed hallways, and the soft hum of the oxygen filter becomes your lullaby. And yet, even in this quiet darkness, his faith doesn't falter. Pain passes, he whispers once, eyes half closed. But love lasts. You glance at the laptop on his table, the open gallery of Eucharistic miracles glowing faintly in the dim room, and you realize something quietly extraordinary. This boy isn't afraid. Weeks pass. The doctors do what they can, but the leukemia spreads quickly, faster than anyone expected. And still, Carlo works. His mission hasn't slowed. If anything, it sharpens, condenses, like he's racing time itself. His hands tremble now when he types, but his words remain steady. Every click, every keystroke, Every update feels like a prayer carved into the heart of the internet. One night, a storm rolls over Milan. Rain lashes against the hospital windows, thunder rumbling softly in the distance. Carlo's laptop is closed for once, resting quietly beside him. He stares up at the ceiling, breathing slowly, deeply. "I used to think heaven was far away," he says softly. "But maybe it's closer than we think. Maybe it's just the direction we choose." His words settle over you like the quiet after a storm. And you understand now, this isn't just about a website. It never was. It's about giving people something to hold on to, something light enough to carry them through the darkest nights. The sun slips gently into the horizon, spilling orange light across the hospital room. The blinds cut the glow into soft stripes that rest across Carlo's bed, his pale skin bathed in gold for a moment. You stand quietly near the window, listening to the rhythmic beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor, steady, fragile, constant. It's October 12, 2006. Carlo is 15 now. The boy who once darted down Milan's cobblestone streets, silver laptop in his backpack, now lies still beneath crisp white sheets. But even here, at the edge of everything, his presence feels luminous. The silver crucifix his mother gave him rests gently on his chest, catching the last rays of daylight. His laptop sits closed on the small table by the bed, its screen dark, but the echoes of his mission alive within it. The room smells faintly of antiseptic and lavender from the tiny bottle his mother placed near the window. She sits beside him, holding his hand softly between hers, whispering prayers under her breath. Every so often, she wipes her cheeks, pretending it's just from the humidity, but you can see through it. Carlo opens his eyes slowly, blinking as though waking from a long dream. His gaze drifts across the room until it settles on you, and for a brief moment, his smile returns, faint, tired but warm. "You came back," he whispers, his voice barely more than air. You nod, moving closer to the bedside. "Always," you answer softly. "The doctors have explained it all. The leukemia has spread faster than anyone expected. The treatments have stopped now. There's nothing left but comfort, quiet, and time." But Carlo doesn't seem afraid. One evening, as the rain taps softly against the windowpane, he turns to his mother and says with quiet certainty, "I'm ready." His mother presses a trembling hand to his forehead, shaking her head gently. "Don't say that, amore. We're still praying for a miracle." Carlo squeezes her hand lightly, his thumb tracing small, patient circles over her knuckles. "Mama," he whispers, "I already have one." The nurses move quietly through the hallway outside, their shoes soft against the polished floors, and the scent of disinfectant clings faintly to the air. Inside the room, though, it's almost unnaturally still. Every sound, every sigh, every rustle of the sheets, feels magnified. Carlo asks you to read to him from one of his notebooks, the small one filled with handwritten notes about Eucharistic miracles. You sit beside him, flipping carefully through the pages until you find his favorite, Lanciano, 8th century. Your voice is low, steady, and soft as you read. "The flesh is real. The blood is real. The tissue belongs to a human heart." Carlo closes his eyes, listening, and after a moment he smiles faintly. "A heart," he whispers. "That's perfect." Later you find him staring at his silver laptop again. It's still closed, but his fingers rest gently on the lid, like a pianist pausing before the first note of a song he already knows by heart. "The website's almost ready," he murmurs, eyes unfocused, as though he's speaking more to the ceiling than to you. All the galleries are linked, the maps, the translations. He pauses, breathing slowly, before adding, I just want people to see what I saw. That the world is full of love, if you know where to look. Night falls gently, draping the hospital in quiet shadows. The steady hum of machines becomes a lullaby, soft and rhythmic, blending with the distant hum of traffic beyond the windows. Around midnight, Carlo asks his mother to dim the lights. The room falls into soft darkness, broken only by the faint glow of the monitor. You sit close to him now, listening to his breathing, shallow, uneven, but steady. And then, out of nowhere, he whispers, almost playfully, Do you think heaven has Wi-Fi? You blink, startled, and let out a quiet laugh you didn't know you had left. I hope so, you reply softly. Otherwise, how will you keep updating the site? Carlo smiles faintly, closing his eyes again. Good, he murmurs. Then I'll keep working. In the early hours of October 12th, the room grows impossibly still. Outside, the city stirs slowly to life, street lamps flickering off one by one, the first trams clattering softly along their rails. Carlo opens his eyes one last time, glancing between his mother and the silver crucifix in her hand. His lips move faintly, whispering words you barely catch. Jesus, I give everything to you. And just like that, with a soft sigh, his chest rises one final time and falls. The steady beep, beep, beep of the monitor slows, and then stops. Silence fills the room. His mother clings to his hand, her forehead pressed against his knuckles, whispering prayers through trembling breaths. A nurse steps inside quietly, her eyes shining with unshed tears, and gently places a hand on her shoulder. You stand frozen, feeling the weight of it settle deep inside you. Not grief, exactly, not yet. Something quieter. Something holy. They leave the laptop on the bedside table, its silver lid reflecting the pale morning light creeping through the blinds. And you realize, the work isn't done. Carlo's gone. But his mission isn't. The road he opened, his road to heaven, has only just begun. The morning after Carlo's passing, Milan wakes slowly, as though the entire city knows something is missing. Outside the hospital, street lamps blink out one by one, and the cobblestones glisten faintly with dew. The air is soft, fragile somehow, carrying the quiet hum of trams and distant church bells. Inside the hospital room, everything has been cleared except for one thing, Carlo's silver Acer laptop. It rests on the bedside table, its lid closed, silent now. But you can feel, that it carries pieces of him inside. The lines of code, the endless galleries of Eucharistic miracles, the handwritten translations carefully typed out late into the night, all of it lives there, waiting. And for a moment, standing in the soft morning light, you understand something new. Carlo's story isn't ending here. It's unfolding. 2 days later, you find yourself in Assisi, where Carlo had asked to be buried. The road there is quiet, winding past rolling Umbrian hills and fields brushed with wildflowers. It feels far away from Milan's restless energy, like stepping into a slower, older rhythm of life. The Basilica of St. Mary of the Angels rises ahead, pale stone glowing under the morning sun. Pilgrims gather outside, their whispers hushed, as though afraid to disturb the weight of the moment. Inside, the air smells faintly of beeswax and ancient stone. Carlo's simple white coffin rests near the altar, a single silver crucifix placed gently on top. Around it, candles flicker softly, their light dancing against the frescoed walls. You sit near the back, watching as people enter quietly, one by one, family, friends, strangers, even tourists who had only just heard his name. There's no loud mourning here, no chaos, just a deep, collective stillness, like the basilica itself is holding its breath. A priest begins to speak, his voice low and warm, filling the space without ever breaking the hush. Carlo reminded us that holiness is not a concept reserved for the past. It is possible, even now, even for the young, even in this world. His words drift upward toward the vaulted ceilings, carried softly by the acoustics of centuries-old stone. You glance at Carlo's mother, sitting near the front, her face pale but peaceful, her hands clasped tightly around a rosary. And then something unexpected happens. During the eulogies, a teenage boy from Milan steps forward, someone you vaguely remember seeing at Carlo's school. His voice trembles at first, but then steadies. He told me once, the boy says, the internet is like a road. You decide where it leads. There's a soft murmur among the pews. You notice heads nodding, faint smiles breaking through tears. After the Mass, people begin to file out quietly into the bright Assisi sunlight. You linger near the basilica steps, listening to fragments of whispered conversations. Have you seen his website? They say he catalogued hundreds of miracles. He built it all himself? At 15? You glance back toward the basilica, the bells chiming softly above, and realize Carlo's road to heaven has already begun to ripple outward. His work, once hidden in a small Milan bedroom, is starting to find its way into the hands of people who need it most. That night you sit in a quiet inn just outside the basilica, laptop open, scrolling through miracoliucrstici.org. The homepage loads slowly. His code is simple, unpolished, but it works. You click on Italy, and up comes a gallery of sacred relics, Lanciano, Siena, Orvieto. Each page carefully linked, each photo labeled, each testimony translated in Carlo's own words. You realize something as you move through the pages. The site isn't just information. It's intention. Carlo's quiet reverence is embedded in every line of code, every caption, every sentence written late at night while the rest of the world slept. It's not flashy. It doesn't try to convince you of anything. It simply shows you what he saw, and lets you decide what to do with it. Weeks pass. Carlo's name begins to spread quietly, almost organically. At first, it's just word of mouth. Parish bulletins, whispered conversations after Mass, blog posts from priests who stumbled across his website. Then Catholic forums begin sharing links, citing Carlo's work like an unexpected lighthouse in the chaotic sea of the internet. Some users start calling him the patron of pixels. Others nickname him Heaven's Coder. But Carlo never asked for recognition. His mission was never about him, and that, strangely, is what draws people closer. One afternoon, you visit his family in Milan. The apartment feels quieter now, his bedroom carefully untouched, papers neatly stacked, floppy disks labeled in his tidy handwriting, the silver laptop resting where he left it. His mother greets you softly and gestures toward the desk. It's all still here, she says. Everything he worked on. You hesitate before touching the laptop, half afraid to disturb something sacred. But when you open it, the screen lights up, humming softly, as if waiting for you. The homepage loads instantly, the one you've seen so many times already, and your throat tightens as you read his words again. Explore the miracles of the Eucharist. See what the world has forgotten. The following week, something unexpected happens. A small Catholic magazine publishes an article about Carlo and his website. Within days, the traffic spikes, hundreds of new visitors exploring the galleries each night. Some email Carlo's mother, sharing how his work brought them back to prayer. Others simply leave quiet thank yous in the site's contact form. One message stands out. "I thought the internet was only noise. Then I found your son's site. Now I believe again." You read it aloud to Carlo's mother. She presses a trembling hand to her lips, tears pooling quietly in her eyes. The ripples grow larger. Parish newsletters start referencing his work. Small radio programs mention the teenager from Milan who turned code into catechesis. And slowly, very slowly, people begin to ask the Vatican about him. Carlo's story is just beginning to surface. Assisi stays quiet long after the funeral, as though the hills themselves are holding their breath. Days pass softly, stitched together by church bells and the rustling of olive trees in the wind. Yet somewhere beyond this peace, whispers begin to move, slowly at first, then steadily, like ripples spreading across water. You hear them in small conversations outside parish doors, in hushed tones after Massachusetts, in the faint clicking of keyboards late at night. Carlo's name is starting to travel. Back in Milan, the apartment feels different now. His room remains untouched, the same pale curtains, the same carefully labeled floppy disk stacked by the window, the silver Acer laptop resting silently on the desk. The laptop is closed, but you can almost sense its weight. It holds more than files. It holds meaning. One evening you sit with his mother, Antonia, at the small kitchen table. A candle burns between you, flickering gently. She pours tea into delicate porcelain cups, her movements slow, deliberate, as though each gesture keeps her anchored. "I still hear him typing at night," she whispers softly, a small, distant smile on her lips. "Like he's still finishing something." You glance toward the hallway. The silver laptop glimmers faintly in the darkness. You almost expect to hear the quiet clicking of keys, but there's only silence. A week later, the phone rings. It's a parish priest from Assisi, his voice warm but thoughtful. "People have been talking about Carlo," he says gently. "About his website, about his work." He explains how miracoliucrstici.org has become something unexpected. Visitors from all over the world, not just Italy, but the US, India, Poland, Argentina, are finding the site and sending emails to their parishes, asking questions about the Eucharistic miracles. "Do you understand?" the priest asks softly. "Your son is catechizing the world." Antonia presses a hand to her lips, tears brightening her eyes, and whispers, almost to herself, "That's all he wanted." Meanwhile, at the Vatican, someone takes notice. It starts with a few researchers in the Congregation for the Causes of Saints, a small office where documents are sifted, testimonies studied, and possible causes for beatification are quietly investigated. One of them stumbles upon Carlo's website and is struck by its meticulous detail, its reverence, its quiet beauty. "Who built this?" she asks a colleague, scrolling through the galleries of Lanciano, Orvieto, Siena, and Buenos Aires. 15? He replies simply, sliding over the printed article from a Catholic magazine. They study his work, leaning over notes and testimonies, murmuring softly to one another. It isn't just the website that surprises them. It's the balance. The care. The way Carlo presents faith not as a demand, but as an invitation. Within months, more documents begin to circulate quietly within Vatican walls. Photos of Carlo. translations of his writings, letters from priests who used his archive during catechism classes, parish reports from as far as Mexico and India, citing how Carlo's work inspired young people to return to prayer. But it isn't just his website drawing attention. It's the life behind it. One afternoon, you find yourself sitting on the stone steps outside San Francesco Church, watching pilgrims arrive from across Italy. Some carry small prayer cards with Carlo's photo, smiling, laptop in hand, his black curls slightly messy under the afternoon sun. A woman kneels nearby, holding her daughter's hand, whispering softly. "He was just like you," she tells her child. "Ordinary. But he loved greatly." You realize, in that moment, how quickly stories can move when they carry something people need. Soon, journalists begin calling Carlo the cyber apostle and heaven's coder. Articles appear in small diocesan newsletters, Catholic blogs, and eventually international media. Some describe him as a visionary, others as a bridge between faith and technology. The attention feels surreal, almost dizzying. You remember the boy in his tiny Milan bedroom, hunched over a second-hand Acer laptop, sipping cocoa while the rain tapped against the glass. He didn't want fame. He wanted connection. And somehow he found it. By the end of 2007, a quiet investigation begins. Vatican officials collect testimonies from those who knew him, classmates, priests, friends, and family. They examine his notebooks, filled with HTML sketches, handwritten translations, and prayers scribbled in the margins. They speak with people across continents who encountered his website and found their faith renewed. And then comes the question they cannot ignore. Could this young man, who lived and died so quietly, be a candidate for sainthood? It's controversial at first. Some historians argue he's too modern, too ordinary. They debate whether a teenager using the internet can belong among saints centuries old, etched into stained glass and marble. But others push back gently. Holiness isn't about the century you live in, one priest writes in a Vatican memo. It's about the love you leave behind. The conversation spreads, sometimes quiet, sometimes heated, until one conclusion becomes clear: Carlo's story matters because it belongs to now. Late one night, you find yourself once again in his room. The silver laptop rests where he left it, untouched but alive. You open it, and the soft blue glow fills the space, illuminating the crucifix above his desk. The homepage loads, unchanged since his last update. Explore the miracles of the Eucharist. See what the world has forgotten. You sit there for a long time, letting the silence settle around you, listening to the faint hum of the old machine. And you realize, this is no longer just Carlo's story. It's everyone's. The Vatican moves slowly. Always has. Always will. But in Carlo's case, the quiet wheels of investigation begin to turn faster than anyone expects. Inside a modest stone building tucked behind St. Peter's Basilica, a small group of officials from the Congregation for the Causes of Saints gather around a long oak table. Papers are stacked in tall, uneven piles, testimonies from Carlo's teachers, friends, and parish priests. A silver laptop, not Carlo's, but a Vatican archivist's, glows faintly at the end of the table, displaying miracoliucrsticii.org. One of the officials leans back, rubbing his temple as he scrolls slowly through Carlo's work. He murmurs something almost to himself. 15 years old, and he documented all of this. Another nods, flipping through a binder filled with printed screenshots of the site. Hundreds of miracles. she whispers, tracing her finger across a grainy image of the Lanciano relics. Translated into multiple languages, with cross-referenced sources. Look at the care, the balance. It's not just devotion. It's discipline. But not everyone agrees. In a side chamber nearby, a separate panel debates quietly, and sometimes sharply. He was just a boy, one historian says flatly, removing his glasses. We can't canonize someone simply because they were passionate about the internet. Another responds gently, her tone patient but firm. It isn't the internet that matters. It's what he did with it. The words hang in the room for a moment. You can almost hear the hum of ancient radiators beneath the stone floors. Finally, a cardinal at the far end of the table speaks softly, his voice steady as marble. The Church has always recognized holiness where the world least expects it. Carlo simply walked a new kind of road. Meanwhile, in Milan, you sit with Carlo's mother, Antonia, in the small kitchen where tea always seems to taste sweeter. Letters arrive daily now, envelopes stacked on the table, each one carrying a different story. Parents write about children who found faith again after visiting Carlo's website. Priests send notes describing entire classrooms captivated by his digital gallery of Eucharistic miracles. One letter stands out. A young man from Poland writes, I thought faith was dead. Then I found Carlo's site. I don't know him, but somehow I feel like he knows me. Antonia reads it twice, holding the page tightly between her fingers as though afraid it might dissolve. He wanted to reach the world, she whispers, eyes shining. I didn't realize he actually had. Back in Rome, the conversation deepens. By 2008, Carlo's cause for canonization is officially opened at the diocesan level. His life begins to be studied carefully, line by line, moment by moment. Investigators examine his writings, his prayers, his notes, scribbled in margins of theology books. They interview classmates and childhood friends, asking questions about his faith, his habits, his ordinary days. One classmate recalls, He played PlayStation with us, the boy says, smiling faintly. But then he'd go quiet and ask, what would God want me to do right now? At the time, I thought it was weird. Now I think he just saw life differently. The Vatican also reviews his website in detail. A team of digital archivists examines every gallery, every linked document, every caption. They're struck not just by Carlo's devotion but by his precision, no exaggerations, no sensationalism, no manipulation. He treated information like relics. One archivist notes softly. Preserved, protected, contextualized. That's rare. It becomes clear that miracoliucrstici.org isn't just a teenager's hobby. It's a carefully crafted repository of global history, theology, and faith, one that scholars themselves begin to reference in academic papers. Still, controversy stirs quietly beneath the surface. Some theologians raise concerns. Calling him patron of the internet seems premature. One memo reads, We must be careful not to glorify technology itself. Others disagree. He didn't glorify technology. Another responds. He transformed it into a tool for evangelization. That is precisely why his witness matters. The debate simmers for years, threading through conferences, articles, and late-night Vatican discussions. But gradually, a consensus begins to form. Carlo's life, though brief, represents something profoundly modern, a bridge between ancient faith and digital possibility. And then, something happens that changes everything. In 2013, a report arrives from Brazil. A small parish claims that a local boy suffering from a rare pancreatic condition recovered completely after his parents prayed for Carlo's intercession. At first, it's treated cautiously. Miracles, after all, require painstaking verification. Medical experts are brought in. Records are studied. Doctors testify under oath that the healing has no scientific explanation. Witnesses recount prayers said before a photo of Carlo, asking for his help. Weeks turn into months, months into a year. And then, the official statement comes quietly, tucked into a Vatican bulletin. The case merits further study. It's not confirmation, not yet, but the air shifts. The whispers in the corridors of the congregation grow louder. People begin to wonder if Carlo's story is about to take an unexpected turn. Meanwhile, back in Milan, you return once again to his room. The laptop still sits where he left it, gathering a thin layer of dust now. You open it gently, pressing the power button, and the familiar hum begins. On the screen, the homepage loads slowly. Explore the miracles of the Eucharist. See what the world has forgotten. Your throat tightens as you realize something quietly extraordinary. Carlo's mission, his quiet dream from that tiny Milan bedroom, is no longer his alone. The Vatican is watching now. The world is watching. It's been years since that quiet October morning when Carlo left this world, but somehow, his voice hasn't faded. In fact, it's louder now, not in the chaotic way the internet usually shouts, but like a soft hum beneath everything, steady and unbroken. You sit at your desk one evening, laptop open, fingers resting idly on the keyboard, when you type it out almost without thinking, miracoliucristi.org. The website loads slowly, as it always has, no fancy redesigns, no modern flash. Same pale background, same blue hyperlinks, same simple menu bar Carlo coded all those years ago. But this time, something is different. At the bottom of the page, a small counter ticks upward, 8,543,271 visitors. 8.5 million. The numbers blur a little as you stare at them. Somewhere in Milan, Carlo's mother probably knows. Somewhere in Rome, someone's definitely watching. And somewhere, maybe in Poland, maybe in Argentina, maybe in a quiet bedroom in the Philippines, a teenager is clicking through Carlo's gallery of miracles right now, seeing the world the way he once saw it, connected, sacred, alive. The news spreads faster than anyone expected. Young Catholics start sharing Carlo's story on social media, Instagram posts with his photo, TikTok clips explaining his website, YouTube channels reacting to his testimony. But what's surprising isn't just the volume, it's the tone. There's no gimmick, no pushy slogans, no endless calls to conversion. Instead, Carlo's story spreads the same way he lived it, quietly, gently, with a sense of invitation. Some posts quote him directly. The internet is like a road. It can lead you to heaven, or drag you to nowhere. Others show screenshots of his homepage, captioned simply, "He made this at 15. Within months, Carlo's name trends across platforms. A boy who left the world in 2006 suddenly feels more present than ever. The Vatican notices, too. By 2018, Carlo's cause for canonization gains momentum. Pilgrims begin visiting his tomb in Assisi, leaving handwritten prayers beneath small framed photos of him holding his silver laptop. The air there smells faintly of roses and candle wax, and the walls echo with footsteps of strangers carrying the same unspoken thought, "He gets us." One afternoon, you find yourself standing there, just a few feet from where Carlo rests. The Basilica of St. Mary of the Angels is quiet, save for the soft shuffle of visitors and the occasional creak of old wooden pews. A group of teenagers kneel together nearby, smartphones clutched loosely in their hands, some snapping photos, others scrolling through his site while whispering about Lanciano and Buenos Aires. One of them, a girl no older than 14, leans toward her friend and says softly, "He was just like us. But he chose something different." And that's the thing, isn't it? Carlo didn't reject technology. He didn't warn people to run from it, to log off forever, to fear it like some forbidden thing. He embraced it, but carefully. His vision was simple: don't let the internet use you. Use it to build something that lasts. Even now, his website reflects that philosophy. No ads, no pop-ups, no endless notifications begging for your attention. It's a rare space untouched by chaos, a kind of sanctuary carved out of bandwidth and code. For millions, it feels like stepping into a quiet chapel, except the door is a hyperlink. In 2019, something happens that changes everything. After years of careful investigation, the Vatican announces that the unexplained healing of the Brazilian boy, the case first reported back in 2013, has officially been declared a miracle attributed to Carlo's intercession. The news spreads instantly. Headlines appear worldwide. Teenage computer moves closer to sainthood. Carlo Acutis recognized for first miracle. Could this boy become the patron saint of the internet? You read article after article, scrolling through photos of Carlo smiling shyly into the camera, holding his laptop like a shield. And somewhere deep inside, you hear his voice again, soft but steady. The internet can be a road to heaven. By 2020, the Vatican announces something few expected to happen so soon. Carlo will be beatified, the step before sainthood. The ceremony takes place in Assisi on October 10, 2020. Thousands gather, spilling into the streets, their candles glowing against the soft Umbrian dusk. Pilgrims kneel on cobblestones, some holding rosaries, others holding phones live streaming the moment to millions more watching across the globe. You stand in the crowd, shoulder to shoulder with strangers, and when Carlo's photo flashes on the massive screen above the basilica, the air grows heavier, almost reverent. He looks exactly as you remember: dark curls, bright eyes, an easy smile. But now, his story belongs to the world. After the ceremony, you wander the narrow streets of Assisi, passing clusters of pilgrims speaking in every imaginable language. You catch fragments of conversation. "He's showing us how to be holy now, not just in books. I want to build something like he did. Did you see his website? It's still online." The phrase repeats again and again, soft but insistent. It's still online. You can't stop smiling as you think about it. How Carlo's little HTML project from his bedroom has outlived him. How it's teaching people years after his last keystroke. In the years since, miracoliucrstici.org has become something of a phenomenon. Catholic schools incorporate it into their lessons. Theology professors cite it in their lectures. Even some skeptical historians admit its value as a centralized digital archive of centuries-old testimonies. But maybe the most extraordinary thing is simpler than all that. Late at night, somewhere in the world, someone opens a browser, stumbles onto his site, and feels less alone. Because that was Carlo's gift, wasn't it? He didn't just archive miracles. He created them, not by breaking natural laws, but by connecting people to meaning when the world felt noisy and empty. Now, the Vatican is quietly considering the next step: full canonization. One more confirmed miracle, and Carlo could officially become Saint Carlo Acutis, patron of the Internet, digital missionaries, and seekers everywhere. But even if that moment takes years, even if the title never comes, his influence is already undeniable. His road is open, paved with hyperlinks and hope, carrying millions closer to something bigger than themselves. Late one night you open his site again. The homepage looks exactly the same, clean, quiet, deliberate. At the bottom, the counter has jumped past 12 million visitors. You smile softly, whispering into the stillness. You did it, Carlo. You really built the road. The screen glows softly in the dim room, the faint blue light of Carlo's homepage washing over your face. Outside, the night hums quietly. A car passes in the distance. A dog barks twice and then falls silent, and somewhere nearby, a street lamp buzzes faintly. You sit there, motionless, staring at the simple words on the page. Explore the miracles of the Eucharist. See what the world has forgotten. You've seen them before, but tonight they land differently. Tonight, they're not just an invitation to Carlo's world, they're a question aimed straight at you. Because here's the thing, you're holding the same tool Carlo once held. A screen. A keyboard. A connection to billions of people. But what are you doing with it? You glance at your open tabs, the usual mess. News headlines screaming in all caps, a playlist queued up for background noise, an online store taunting you with abandoned carts, social media feeds endless as the night. It's chaos. The kind Carlo saw coming years ago. You remember what he whispered once, in the glow of his small Milan bedroom, tapping softly at his silver Acer laptop. The Internet is like a road, but you choose the direction. Back then, it sounded abstract, almost poetic. Now, it feels personal. You close a few tabs, letting the clutter fall away until only one remains, miracoliucrstici.org. The gallery loads slowly, its old code holding up against time like stone under rain. One by one, the pages unfold, ancient churches, reliquaries, testimonies written by trembling hands centuries ago. You click through slowly, deliberately. Lanciano. Orvieto. Siena. Buenos Aires. Each story feels like a thread, woven carefully into a larger tapestry Carlo tried to show the world. Each one whispers softly from across time, carrying echoes of faith, doubt, awe, and wonder. And somewhere between the lines, you start to realize something. This wasn't just about miracles for Carlo. It was about meaning. You remember his warning from Section 7, the night he stood by the rain-soaked window, his voice low and steady. The Internet can pull you down, or lift you up. And now you can see what he meant. You scroll past another gallery. Photographs of a tiny chapel in Mexico, a relic tucked carefully into an altar, and you can almost feel Carlo's quiet reverence in the captions. No noise. No exaggeration. No endless chasing of clicks. Just connection. You lean back in your chair, staring at the ceiling, letting the thought settle. What kind of road am I walking? Because the truth is, you're on it every day. Each swipe, each like, each search, each link you open, they're choices. Choices that take you somewhere. Maybe closer to understanding. Maybe further into distraction. Maybe nowhere at all. And Carlo? He used the same road but walked it differently. He turned pixels into prayer, code into catechesis, and bandwidth into bridges. He built a sanctuary in a place most people saw only as noise. You glance around your room. The soft hum of your laptop fan fills the silence, just like his once did. Outside, a faint breeze rattles the blinds, carrying the quiet rhythm of a city settling into sleep. For the first time tonight, you imagine what it might look like to follow Carlo's example, not by copying his mission, but by finding your own. Maybe you won't build a website. Maybe you won't archive miracles. But maybe you'll choose to create instead of consume. Maybe you'll choose meaning over noise. Maybe you'll choose connection over distraction. Because Carlo's legacy isn't a website. It's a choice. You return to the homepage again, letting your eyes linger on the title. Miracoli Eucharisticai. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It simply invites. And isn't that what this whole thing has been about? Not converting the internet into something holy by force, but offering people a different way forward, a path they didn't realize was open to them. Your phone buzzes softly on the desk. A new notification. Another one. The algorithm pulling you back into the endless scroll. You reach for it instinctively, then pause, Carlo's words echoing quietly in your head. Every click shapes who you become. The screen fades to black as you set the phone back down, letting the quiet stretch a little longer. You realize you're still on the road, always have been. But now, for the first time, you're thinking about where it leads. The clock ticks past midnight. You dim the lights and close the laptop gently, but the thought lingers like a soft hum under your skin. Somewhere, half a world away, someone else is opening Carlo's site for the first time tonight, clicking through his galleries, discovering the same miracles you just saw. And maybe, just maybe, they're asking the same question you are. Where am I going? The night is quiet now. Somewhere outside your window, a soft wind stirs the branches, brushing leaves gently against the glass. The city has finally settled, its noise fading into the low hum of distant traffic and the occasional hush of footsteps far below. Inside, only the faint sound of your breathing fills the room, steady and slow. You sit back in your chair, the screen dark, Carlo's website closed, but his voice lingers, quiet and constant, like the echo of a song that never really ends. The internet is like a road, he whispered once. You choose where it leads. You let the words roll through your mind again, softer now, almost like a lullaby. You think about his journey, this quiet boy from Milan, hunched over a second-hand laptop in a tiny bedroom, building something he didn't know would outlive him. You think about the late nights, the endless galleries of miracles, the code typed carefully while the rain tapped against the window. You think about the hospital, the soft beeps of the monitor, the silver crucifix resting gently on his chest, the calm smile that never wavered, even as his body weakened. And you think about the ripple effect, the pilgrims kneeling in Assisi, the teenagers sharing his story online, the millions of visitors who have clicked through his site, wandering the same galleries Carlo once built by hand. He didn't live long. But he lived deeply. Your eyelids grow heavier as you sit there, letting the silence cradle you. In the distance, a clock chimes softly, marking the slow passing of another hour. It feels strange, doesn't it? How someone you've never met can change the way you see everything, the internet, your choices, even yourself. Carlo's story isn't about perfection. It isn't about sainthood carved into marble or names etched into cathedrals. It's about something smaller, softer. It's about intention. He used the same tools you have, a keyboard, a screen, a connection, but he walked the road differently. Where others chased noise, he built meaning. Where others collected likes, he collected hope. Where others scrolled endlessly, he created something that lasts. And that choice, his choice, opens the door for yours. You lean back, closing your eyes now, letting the thought settle deep into you. Maybe the road you're on isn't fixed. Maybe you get to decide where it leads. You picture it for a moment, the endless expanse of the digital highway stretching out before you, countless paths winding into darkness, into distraction, into silence, and sometimes into light. Maybe that's the invitation Carlo left behind, to choose light, to click with purpose, to connect with meaning, to create something that whispers softly into the noise. This matters. The ceiling fan turns lazily above you, stirring the still air into a faint, steady rhythm. You let your breathing match it, slow and even, your thoughts dissolving into a gentle hush. Somewhere, half a world away, another person is staring at the same pale homepage, scrolling through the same gallery of miracles, wondering the same quiet questions you are tonight. You are not alone on this road. You never were. Outside, the wind picks up slightly, rattling the blinds. The sound is soothing, like a lullaby from the city itself. Your eyelids grow heavier still, the edges of the room blurring into soft shadows. You think about Carlo one last time, his quiet smile, his steady hands, his silver laptop glowing softly in the dark. And you imagine him whispering, gently, just for you. Don't be afraid. You're already closer than you think. The hum of the world softens, the weight of the day melts away, and the last thing you feel is a quiet peace settling over you, like warm light on cold stone. And as your thoughts drift further, slower now, the story folds into silence, carrying you with it. A soft reminder lingers, like a breath you didn't know you were holding. The road is still open. You get to choose where it leads. End of script. Sweet dreams.